Tec Sounds presents EduTrends.
Welcome to the EduTrends podcast and videocast, brought to you by the Institute for the Future of Education of Tecnológico de Monterrey. I am your host, José Pepe Escamilla, IFE Associate Director. In this episode, I had an insightful conversation with Dr. Richard Davidson, Professor of Psychology and Psychiatry at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and founder and director of the Center for Healthy Minds. We discussed COVID-19 impact on students and teachers' social and emotional health. Also, we talk about how technology, like the Healthy Minds program app, can support students' emotional health. And Richard explained what he sees as the 4 pillars of a healthy mind. Enjoy. Hi, Richard. Welcome to this episode of EduTrends podcast and webcast produced by the Institute for the Future of Education of Tecnológico Monterrey. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it and look forward to having a conversation.
Thanks. So we will be talking about socio-emotional health, particularly in higher education communities. We are aware that there has been some increase in the issues relating to socio-emotional health, particularly in students in the last couple of years. And during the pandemic, we have seen stress, people that are working from home. I'm talking about faculty or collaborators, staff, but also students. And this increased number of people in houses has also aggravated problems in the house, but also isolation from the students. So during the last 20 months of the pandemic, what challenges have you seen, and how big is this problem?
Well, these are important questions. We know that even before the pandemic, the rates of anxiety and depression were dramatically increasing among our youth, among college students. In the United States today, actually before the pandemic, student health services on university campuses reported that they were not able to hire the number of mental health counselors they needed to address the crisis. And now with the pandemic, it has only become worse. We know that particularly in college-age youth, the rates of anxiety and depression worldwide have dramatically increased during the pandemic compared to the rates before the pandemic. And this is, there was a paper that recently appeared in the British medical journal Lancet, and the data show that in every country that was examined, and this is, I think, in 204 countries throughout the world, the rates of depression and anxiety have increased during COVID compared to pre-COVID. And in many parts of the world, the rates are more than 30% higher. So it's not just a small amount, but it's actually quite a significant amount in many parts of the world. And among college-age students, the rates are particularly severe. And so we have a significant crisis in addition to the COVID pandemic. There is the accompanying mental health pandemic that is global in nature. And it's really important that we develop strategies that can help decrease the likelihood and decrease the severity of these problems in this age group particularly.
Thank you. Very interesting figures that you give us, 30% higher the stress in the world, and you talk about a mental health pandemic that was there before the crisis. How can you explain this mental health pandemic? Why?
Well, there are many factors, I think, which are contributing to this, but the college students today are predicted to um, be under more significant stress of various kinds compared to students in the previous generation. This is due to a number of causes. One is in most parts of the world, college students today are less likely to earn more than their parents are earning now. And this is a reversal of trends that have been present for many decades. The second, I think, important contributor is what's been called eco-anxiety. The climate change crisis is very significant, and this is creating a sense of hopelessness among our youth because they are, I think, research shows that they're unsure of how to respond to this crisis. They feel helpless in the face of this crisis. And so that further adds to the challenges and stresses that they experience. And so in addition to the usual stress of grades and their worrying about their future, there are these added elements that are very significant and are playing a really important role in contributing to the very high rates of anxiety and depression that we see today.
Thank you. One more question around this. I read somewhere that people were blaming also social networks. What do you think about that?
You mean social media?
No, the access to social networks may make people more miserable. Is more or less the thing that I read. So I wanted to know your opinion on that. If this mental crisis that we have lived before the pandemic, it's also related to the way social media work.
Yeah, well, there's more and more evidence to suggest that social media is contributing to these problems. And it's contributing to these problems because of many different factors. One is social comparison, where they might see other individuals who are seemingly more well off or happier than they are. And when they compare themselves to these other people that they see online, which half the time is likely to be an exaggeration anyway, they have feelings of low self-esteem, and this further contributes to the difficulties. The average teenager, at least in the US today, spends about 9 hours in front of a screen, and much of it is consumed by social media. And I think that I often say we're all participants in a grand experiment for which none of us have provided our informed consent. And this is a big problem. And so, in my view, we need to equip our youth with the skills that will enable them to not be hijacked by these social media. We're not going to get rid of social media. We're not going to get rid of the technology that we can't control. There's one thing we can control, and that is our own mind. And we can teach kids the skills that they need to navigate the digital landscape in a way which is less harmful. And this is urgently needed.
That's great to know that we can do things to avoid this. So I would like to go into that direction. How can we foster our students' social emotional health? What can we do in higher education institutions?
part of higher education, I think, needs to include strengthening social and emotional skills, skills that enable us to regulate our minds in a way that can help us to resist these distractions and to not be so hijacked by them. And so research shows that we can train people to be better at voluntarily regulating their attention, which is a key element of self-regulation. And by regulating one's attention, we can willfully choose what we invest our attention in, rather than leaving that to the tech companies and social media platforms who are basically hijacking our attention. And so we can, I think, do a much better job in training our youth to be better educated in their attention. And this is something that I think is critical. I believe we have a moral obligation to include that in our curricula. And it should start at a very young age. It doesn't, it's important to do this in university students, but it's also important to start this. You can start this in preschool when a child is 4 years old, and we have evidence to show that. So I think that this is really, really important.
Thank you. So, well, I know that in your institute, your work has been always around these issues of social emotional health, but also social emotional education, no? So what's the proposal that you offer in these institutions that can be helpful for the people that are hearing this interview?
Well, for college students, I think there are many different options. I often remind people that one size does not fit all. And so we need to do a better job at figuring out which strategies are most effective for which kinds of people. But having said that, we've articulated a framework for understanding the plasticity of well-being, how well-being can actually be trained. And we've actually put that into a freely available app called the Healthy Minds Program, which is available all over the world. Unfortunately, right now, it's publicly available only in English, but we are very interested, of course, in having it translated into Spanish and other languages. This program has mini podcasts which present the science around these different pillars of well-being. And it also includes specific mental exercises, simple practices that we can do to help strengthen each of the core elements of well-being. And this is something that for those readers or viewers who might be interested, we would certainly recommend that you explore it. You can try it out. It's totally free. And so there's essentially no cost in doing that. And if you find it to be valuable, you can use it more extensively. And you can also, in this app, use a simple measurement tool to assess each of the 4 components of well-being to see how you're doing, and then to monitor your progress over time.
You're talking about 4 pillars of well-being or components. What are those 4 pillars?
So the 4 pillars of well-being are these. The first we call awareness, which is where mindfulness would be, and also where our capacity to voluntarily regulate our attention would reside. The second pillar of well-being is connection. And connection is about being present with others. It's about the qualities which are important for healthy social relationships. Qualities like appreciation and gratitude and kindness and compassion. The third pillar of well-being we call insight. And insight is about self-knowledge. And it's about being curious about how our minds actually work, particularly around the narrative that we all carry around about ourselves. We all have this inner narrative. And part of well-being, an important part of well-being, is not so much changing the narrative, but it's changing our relationship to the narrative so that we can see the narrative for what it is, which is a bunch of thoughts, rather than having the narrative hijack us, rather than the narrative defining us completely. And so when we can have a little distance from the narrative, it can be enormously beneficial. And finally, the last pillar of well-being, the fourth pillar, is purpose. And purpose is about finding one's true sense of direction in life, and identifying our core values, and then aligning more and more of our everyday behavior around our sense of purpose and around our values. So those are the four pillars of well-being, and we know that each of these pillars can be trained.
Yes, and I imagine that you have measured the effects of the use of these tools, this app, in the users.
Yes, of course, we've measured that, and we have done what is considered the gold standard of research in this kind of area, the randomized controlled trial. And we've shown in these randomized controlled trials the efficacy of using the app, cultivating these four pillars of well-being on measures of well-being, as well as in decreasing various indices of distress.
Very interesting. When you talk about these four pillars, they seem very profound, no? So awareness, self-regulation of your time, consciousness, connecting with other people, those skills of kindness, compassion, insight, knowing yourself, and being able to understand the narrative and purpose, finding sense of the direction of your life. There seem like a very profound things that make us human, and being able to develop those things in a program that is designed for that somehow doesn't seem natural. I don't know, if I don't want to be unrespectful, but it doesn't sound like intuitive. Am I right?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, no, the question is that it's incredible. More than a question, is a comment. It sounds incredible that we can develop those things in a program, and that you can measure that. So it's enlightening. I will say that we can do that because those kind of things you never think as a teacher, for instance, that you can teach that easily. No, teaching purpose or teaching insight, I think it's complicated to have that on your curriculum. It's unusual to have that on your curriculum.
Yes, I think I can understand that. I think in some ways it is unusual, although these are capacities which are absolutely essential to our well-being. And the fact that they can be strengthened really comes directly from the science that teaches us that the neural systems, the brain systems that support each of these pillars, show plasticity. And we know that they can be shaped through training, through experience. And so rather than leaving our brains to be shaped by the forces around us, over which we have very little control, like social media, why not take the reins and actually develop control of our mind ourselves, so that we can steer our own mind rather than having our mind bounce around from one kind of source of information to the other. So that's really the invitation in this work.
Fascinating. I always think that the problems of emotional health are still the elephant on the room, the things that we don't talk about openly. And I'm talking on the things that are problematic, but also on the development of them. It's still a subject that many people and institutions find difficult to talk about.
Yes, I think that's true. But I think things are changing. I think that there is more and more traction, and ranging from university administrators to healthcare providers to corporate executives to government officials, all across these different entities. There is a growing recognition that the trajectory that humanity has been on is not a particularly healthy or sustainable one. And this was before COVID. And COVID has only caused things to be worse. And so I think there is a growing recognition that we need to do something because the course that we've been on is not a good one. And so we need to recalibrate. And I see the kind of mental exercise that we're suggesting as part of that recalibration. And, we've become accustomed to doing physical exercise. I would guess that many people who are viewing this interview do physical exercise in their weekly routine because we recognize that it's good for our personal health. And I'll bet you every one of the viewers brushes their teeth every day. And this is not part of our genome. We've learned to do this because it's important for our personal physical hygiene. And I also bet that everyone who's viewing this believes that their mind is even more important than their teeth. And yet we don't nourish our mind in the same way. But it actually doesn't take that much. It's just simple little exercises. And if you do it every day, it's like brushing your teeth. It will really make a difference.
Yes, I can relate to that. I meditate almost daily, and I recognize also that when the more stress I have around me, the more meditations help me to manage myself around those situations.
Yes, that's great.
And what about another very important actor of the universities, the teachers? During the pandemic, we have seen that more teachers are complaining about the workload, all the stress they're having, the things that they have to do. And we have some evidence that there's the teaching profession is a profession that is suitable for burnout. And during the COVID pandemic, it has been more stressful for them. Have you done some research around the work of the teachers and these possibilities of having some tools to help them?
We've done research with teachers at the K through 12 level, and we've also done work with staff at the university level, but not with university professors themselves. They're, a difficult breed. They typically don't like to be told what to do. And so I think they're a more challenging group, but the teachers in the K through 12 space have greatly benefited from this kind of program. They have been very challenged during the pandemic because particularly in the early stages of the pandemic, before the vaccine, they were all home and they were expected to teach virtually. Many of these teachers had their own kids at home because there wasn't regular school. And that was all very, very challenging. And so we've found that training their mind to cultivate well-being was enormously beneficial, even though they did it for just a short amount of time every day. In the research we did, the average amount of time that the teachers spent per day practicing was about 5 minutes per day, and yet they showed dramatic reductions on measures of distress after practicing for 1 month.
That's great. So it shows what you have said about the plasticity of the mind and the power of these 4 pillars that you have shared with us.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you, Richard, for your time and for sharing with our audience some light on these critical issues that is affecting our students, teachers, and everyone around higher education. So it's very enlightening to know that this plasticity of the brain can allow us to develop those skills that will help us navigate this mental health pandemic. We will be putting some resources available to our audience so they can get to your program and know more about these 4 pillars in your Healthy Minds program app.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and we look forward to talking about emotional education with you again.
Very good. Happy to do that.
For more information, visit observatory.tech.mx/EduTrends podcast and ife.tech.mx. A special thanks to Tecnológico de Monterrey, the Institute for the Future of Education, and the Tec Sounds team. Tec Sounds producer Miguel Mejia, EduTrends producers Esteban Venegas and Cristian Guijosa, post-production Alejandro Sanchez. Stay tuned and play Tec Sounds in your favorite podcast app for other great shows and content.